Meet Sophia Bennett, the woman who will become my son's future wife. You've enjoyed our family's wealth long enough. Sign the papers and leave with whatever dignity you have left.
Vanessa, I'm sorry.
As the massive doors closed behind Vanessa, inside the ballroom, no one could understand what had just happened. Why hadn't she cried? Why hadn't she fought back? And most importantly, why did she leave looking so calm? Only one secret has the answer. Vanessa Monroe froze mid-step as porcelain shattered across the polished marble floor. A crystal wine glass had exploded at her feet. Evelyn Whitmore slowly lowered her hand after throwing it, then smiled as if nothing had happened. "Good," Evelyn said loudly. "Now that I have everyone's attention." The ballroom fell silent. More than 100 guests, business executives, socialites, politicians, and members of the Whitmore family, turned toward the stage inside the magnificent Whitmore estate. Daniel Whitmore stood beside his mother, his jaw tight, refusing to look at his wife. Vanessa looked from Evelyn to Daniel. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Evelyn picked up a microphone. "For years," she announced, "our family has tolerated a mistake." Whispers spread across the room. She continued, "Tonight, we finally correct that mistake." Two security guards stepped forward. One carried an envelope. The other escorted a beautiful young woman wearing an elegant emerald evening gown. The woman looked nervous. Vanessa had never seen her before. Evelyn wrapped an affectionate arm around the stranger. "Everyone," she said proudly, "meet Sophie Bennett, the woman who will become my son's future wife." The room erupted into shocked gasps. Vanessa slowly turned toward Daniel. He still wouldn't meet her eyes. The security guard handed Vanessa the envelope. She opened it. Divorce papers. For a long moment, nobody breathed. Evelyn smiled triumphantly. "You've enjoyed our family's wealth long enough," she said. "Sign the papers and leave with whatever dignity you have left." Daniel finally spoke. "Vanessa." His voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry." Those two words cut deeper than any scream ever could. Vanessa searched his face. She wasn't looking for an explanation. She was looking for the husband who had once promised to protect her. He wasn't there anymore. Instead of crying, she calmly pulled a pen from her purse. The scratching sound of ink against paper echoed through the silent ballroom. She signed only the acknowledgement of receipt. Then she closed the folder and handed it back. "If this is the future you've chosen," she said softly, "I truly hope it gives you the peace you're looking for." Without another word, she picked up her handbag and began walking toward the exit. No shouting, no pleading, no scene. Just quiet footsteps. That silence unsettled the room more than tears ever could. Behind her, Evelyn laughed. "See? Even she knows she has no place here anymore." Vanessa stopped without turning around. "I've learned something over the years." Everyone waited. The loudest people in the room usually know the least. She walked out. The massive doors closed behind her. Inside the ballroom, guests exchanged confused glances. Why wasn't she angry? Why did she look relieved? "I thought she'd fight." Even Sophie looked uncomfortable. She leaned toward Daniel. "Is she okay?" Daniel forced a smile. She's always been dramatic in her own way. But deep inside, something about Vanessa's calmness disturbed him. If she had nothing, why wasn't she afraid? If you're enjoying this story so far, take a second to subscribe, like this video, and let us know in the comments. What would you have done if you were in Vanessa's shoes? Now let's see what happens next. Rain poured outside as Vanessa drove away from the estate. Her hands rested steadily on the steering wheel. Not once did she wipe away a tear. Her phone rang. The screen displayed a familiar name. Richard Collins. She answered. "Richard, I heard. So did the whole city by now. I'm sorry, Vanessa." She smiled faintly. "Don't be." There was a brief silence. Then Richard asked carefully, "Are you ready?" Vanessa looked through the rain-covered windshield. "I've been ready for years. I'll prepare everything." "Thank you." She ended the call. For the first time that night, a single tear rolled down her cheek. Not because Daniel had left, but because the man she fell in love with had disappeared long before tonight. Back at the estate, music resumed. Champagne flowed. Guests convinced themselves the uncomfortable moment had passed. Evelyn raised another glass. To new beginnings. People applauded. Daniel forced himself to smile. Sophie remained unusually quiet. She leaned closer. Daniel. Yes. Didn't that seem cruel? Evelyn answered before Daniel could. Cruel? She laughed. My dear, that woman trapped my son for 10 years. Daniel nodded. My mother isn't wrong. Sophie frowned. I thought you said the marriage simply stopped working. It did. Then why humiliate her publicly? Daniel sighed. Because she wouldn't have accepted a private divorce. The lie came so naturally that even he almost believed it. Across the room, several executives whispered among themselves. Vanessa handled that surprisingly well. I expected lawsuits. I expected screaming. Something doesn't feel right. Daniel overheard them. He immediately interrupted. She's leaving with a generous settlement. One executive raised an eyebrow. So you've already finalized asset division? Daniel smiled confidently. My lawyers have everything under control. Evelyn added proudly. The Whitmore family always protects what's ours. Everyone nodded. Nobody questioned it. Why would they? Daniel was the celebrated CEO of Sterling Capital Group. The Whitmore estate carried his family name. Luxury cars filled the driveway. Private jets bore the company logo. Everything appeared to belong to him. The following morning, Daniel entered the headquarters of Sterling Capital Group. Employees greeted him respectfully. Good morning, Mr. Whitmore. Morning. He walked into his luxurious office overlooking the city skyline. His assistant followed closely. Sir, your divorce attorney called. Daniel loosened his tie. What did he say? He wants to meet this afternoon. Perfect. Daniel sat behind his massive mahogany desk. This should be straightforward. His assistant hesitated. There was one other thing. What? A lawyer named Richard Collins requested copies of several company ownership records. Daniel barely looked up. Who authorized that? He said he represents Mrs. Whitmore. Daniel chuckled. She's trying to negotiate. Should I deny the request? No. Daniel leaned back confidently. Let him waste his time. Across town, Vanessa entered a quiet law office. Richard Collins stood waiting beside a conference table covered with thick folders. He had known Vanessa since she was a little girl. He wasn't simply her attorney. He had been her late father's closest friend. Richard looked at her with concern. Are you sure about this? Vanessa removed her wedding ring and placed it gently on the table. I didn't spend 10 years protecting my father's legacy just to let someone take it through arrogance. Richard nodded. I thought you'd say that. He opened the first folder. Inside were trust documents, property deeds, corporate ownership certificates, shareholder agreements, bank authorizations, everything perfectly organized. Richard looked directly into Vanessa's eyes. Your father planned for every possibility. He always believed wealth could attract the wrong people, and he wanted to make sure no one could ever steal what your family built. Vanessa gently touched the top document. My father also believed character reveals itself when people think they've already won. Richard smiled. Then Daniel is about to reveal a great deal about his character. Vanessa took a slow breath. I never lied to him, Richard. I know. I simply never corrected assumptions he was too proud to question. Richard closed the folder. Once these documents are presented, their entire world will change. Vanessa nodded quietly. Not because I'm seeking revenge. She looked toward the window, but because truth has finally decided it's time to speak. Daniel walked into the conference room that afternoon wearing the same confidence he carried into every negotiation. His divorce attorney, Michael Hayes, stood beside a polished oak table. Good afternoon, Daniel. Let's get this over with. Michael slid a folder toward him. I've already prepared our opening proposal. Daniel opened it. Vanessa keeps her personal belongings, jewelry gifted before the marriage, and a financial settlement generous enough to avoid unnecessary court battles. He smirked. Fair. Michael continued. The Whitmore estate, Sterling Capital Group, the investment accounts, the vacation properties, and all executive assets remain under your control. Daniel leaned back. She'd be foolish to fight that. A knock interrupted them. Richard Collins entered carrying 2 leather briefcases. Vanessa followed quietly. She wore a simple cream-colored suit, her hair neatly tied back. No expensive jewelry. No dramatic entrance. No hatred on her face. Only peace. Daniel gave a sarcastic smile. You came alone? Vanessa pulled out her chair. I brought everyone I need. Michael looked toward Richard. Shall we begin? Richard nodded. My client has reviewed your proposal. Daniel folded his arms. And Richard calmly placed the proposal back on the table. We reject every single condition. Daniel laughed. You reject it? Yes. Michael frowned. On what grounds? Richard answered without raising his voice. Because your proposal assumes Mr. Whitmore owns assets that legally belong to my client. The room became quiet. Daniel chuckled. This isn't funny. It isn't intended to be. Michael pushed his glasses higher. Mr. Collins, perhaps there's been some misunderstanding. Richard unlocked his briefcase. There has. He removed a certified property deed. This is the registered ownership of the Whitmore estate. Michael accepted it. Seconds later, his expression changed. He read it again. Then again. Daniel noticed immediately. What? Michael swallowed. The registered owner. What about it? Is Vanessa Monroe. Daniel laughed louder. Impossible. Richard calmly produced another document. The original transfer from the Monroe family trust. Another. The protected inheritance registration. Another. The updated land records. Each carried the same name. Vanessa Monroe. Daniel's smile slowly faded. There has to be an error. There isn't. Michael flipped through page after page. Every document had government certification, official seals, legal registrations. Nothing appeared questionable. Daniel leaned forward. I've lived there for 10 years. Richard nodded. Yes. I paid staff. Yes. I renovated the property. Yes. Richard looked him directly in the eye. You also lived there with the permission of its owner. Silence. Daniel turned sharply toward Vanessa. You knew? She met his eyes. I've always known. Why didn't you tell me? I never hid anything. You let me believe. I let you believe what you never cared enough to verify. Daniel's breathing became heavier. Evelyn suddenly burst into the room without knocking. I came as soon as Daniel called. She looked around. What's going on? Daniel pointed toward the documents. They're claiming the estate belongs to Vanessa. Evelyn laughed. What nonsense. Richard calmly handed her the deed. Her laughter stopped. She stared at the papers. This. Her hands trembled. This can't be right. It is. Evelyn looked toward Vanessa. You manipulated my son. Vanessa's voice remained gentle. No. You tricked us. No. Then explain yourself. Vanessa folded her hands neatly. You never once asked who owned the estate. Evelyn opened her mouth. But no words came. Vanessa continued. You assumed. Daniel slammed both hands onto the table. What about Sterling Capital? Richard slowly reached into the second briefcase. I was hoping you'd ask. He removed another thick folder. This contains the shareholder registry. Michael immediately took it. The room became so quiet that the turning of each page sounded deafening. Daniel watched Michael's face lose all color. No. Michael whispered. No. Daniel stood. What is it? Michael slowly looked up. Daniel. What? You don't own the controlling shares. Daniel laughed nervously. I own 51%. Michael slowly shook his head. You own 12. Daniel stared. 12. Richard spoke calmly. The remaining controlling interest has always belonged to the Monroe family trust. Daniel couldn't believe what he was hearing. No. Richard continued. Mrs. Monroe became sole beneficiary after her parents passed away. Daniel's knees felt weak. I've been CEO for years. Yes. How? Richard answered. Because Vanessa voted in favor of your appointment every single year. Daniel slowly turned toward his wife. You? She gave a small nod. I believed in you. His voice cracked. You could have removed me? At any time. And you never did. I wanted my husband to succeed. Daniel sank back into his chair. For the first time in years. He looked genuinely frightened. News traveled faster than anyone expected. By evening, Sterling Capital's directors had received copies of the ownership records. An emergency board meeting was scheduled for the following morning. Inside the executive boardroom, the directors sat in complete silence. Chairman Harold Bennett placed the documents in front of every member. Ladies and gentlemen, he removed his glasses. We have a serious governance issue. One director spoke first. Are these documents authentic? Our legal department verified every page. Another director frowned. So Vanessa Monroe is our majority shareholder? Correct. And Daniel? 12%. The room erupted into murmurs. One elderly director sighed. We've been making decisions based on assumptions. Harold nodded. It appears so. Another director looked concerned. If this becomes public, our investors will demand answers. Harold closed the folder. We need to speak with Mrs. Monroe immediately. Meanwhile, Evelyn paced inside the Whitmore estate. This is impossible. Daniel sat motionless on the sofa. His untouched coffee had gone cold. I should have checked. Evelyn stopped. Stop blaming yourself. Daniel looked up. I never checked anything. What difference does it make? He laughed bitterly. I built my confidence on assumptions. Evelyn knelt beside him. We'll challenge the documents. Daniel slowly shook his head. They're genuine. We'll sue. For what? Evelyn had no answer. At that moment, the front doorbell rang. A courier handed Daniel another envelope. He opened it. Inside was an official notice. Emergency board meeting. Attendance required. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock. Daniel immediately knew. This wasn't about the divorce anymore. Across the city, Sophie sat alone inside a quiet cafe. She replayed the gala over and over in her mind. Something about Vanessa refused to leave her thoughts. She remembered the calm smile, the quiet goodbye, the absence of hatred. Her phone buzzed. Daniel. She answered. Hi. I've been looking for you. You sound stressed. There have been complications. What kind? Legal. About Vanessa? Daniel hesitated. It's nothing serious. Before Sophie could respond, she heard Evelyn shouting in the background. Tell her we'll fix this. Daniel quickly muted the call. Sophie frowned. For the first time, she wondered whether she'd been told the whole truth. That evening, Vanessa stood alone on the balcony of her penthouse overlooking the city lights. Richard walked outside holding 2 glasses of sparkling water. You've had a long day. She accepted one. I have. He smiled. The board wants to meet you. I know. They're shocked. I'm not. Richard looked at her carefully. Do you ever regret staying silent all these years? Vanessa thought for a long moment. I regret believing love didn't require honesty. Richard nodded. You loved him. With everything I had. And now? Vanessa looked toward the glowing skyline. I don't hate Daniel. Richard waited. I simply don't recognize the man he became. Her phone vibrated. An unknown number. She answered. Hello. A trembling voice came through. Vanessa. It was Sophie. I think we need to talk. Vanessa remained silent. Then Sophie whispered words that changed everything. I don't think Daniel told me the truth. Sophie tightened her grip on the phone. I know this is strange, she said quietly. You have every reason to refuse to speak with me. Vanessa looked across the city skyline before answering. What would you like to talk about? I want the truth. Vanessa remained silent. Sophie continued, her voice trembling. Daniel told me your marriage had been over for years. He said you refused to sign divorce papers because you wanted his money. After everything that's happened today, I don't know what to believe anymore. Vanessa closed her eyes for a moment. I won't tell you what to believe, Sophie. Why not? Because everyone deserves the chance to discover the truth without someone forcing it on them. There was a long pause. Finally, Sophie whispered, Thank you for answering my call. You've done nothing to me. What do you mean? The person who broke his promises wasn't you. Vanessa ended the call. Richard looked at her. You could have exposed Daniel. He'll do that himself. The next morning, Sterling Capital's executive boardroom was filled before 9 o'clock. Every director sat quietly. Lawyers occupied one side of the room. Auditors sat on the other. Daniel entered wearing an expensive navy suit. For the first time in years, no one greeted him. Chairman Harold Bennett pointed toward an empty chair. Please have a seat. Daniel looked around. Where's Vanessa? The doors opened. Vanessa walked in beside Richard Collins. Every director immediately stood. Daniel's eyes widened. Not one person had ever stood for him. Harold smiled respectfully. Good morning, Ms. Monroe. Good morning. Thank you for coming. Daniel stared in disbelief. Harold cleared his throat. This meeting concerns the future leadership of Sterling Capital. Daniel interrupted. I'm still the CEO. Harold looked directly at him. That is precisely what we need to discuss. The company lawyer stood. After reviewing corporate records, we have confirmed that Ms. Monroe is the controlling shareholder through the Monroe Family Trust. Every eye turned toward Vanessa. The lawyer continued. Under the company's bylaws, the majority shareholder has authority to appoint or remove executive leadership. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. Harold folded his hands. Daniel, during the last 3 years, company profits have declined, 3 major acquisitions have failed, and investor confidence has weakened. Daniel defended himself. The market changed. A director spoke. So did your judgment. Another added. You ignored repeated financial warnings. A third director sighed. You believe this company belonged to you. Silence. Harold looked at Vanessa. As majority shareholder, would you like to address the board? Vanessa slowly stood. She looked around the room. I didn't come here to humiliate anyone. Her calm voice filled the room. I came because this company represents thousands of employees who deserve stability. She looked briefly at Daniel. My personal life should never have affected their future. The room remained silent. Harold nodded respectfully. Do you have a recommendation? I do. She took a slow breath. I recommend new leadership. Daniel's face turned pale. You can't do this. Vanessa met his eyes. I already did. Harold called for a vote. All in favor of appointing interim CEO Catherine Ellis while a permanent successor is selected? Hands rose. One after another. Every single director voted yes. Harold lowered his hand. The motion passes unanimously. Daniel looked around the room in disbelief. No. Security quietly entered. Harold spoke gently. Daniel, your executive access has been suspended effective immediately. One of the security officers stepped forward. Sir, we'll escort you to collect your personal belongings. Daniel looked toward Vanessa. You planned this. She shook her head. No. When? The night you chose to replace your wife with someone else. Daniel lowered his head. For the first time, he had no argument. Outside headquarters, reporters surrounded the entrance. Cameras flashed. Questions flew through the air. Mr. Whitmore, were you removed as CEO? Is it true you never owned the company? Did your wife control Sterling Capital all along? Daniel covered his face as security guided him into a waiting car. Across the street, employees watched silently, not with satisfaction, with disappointment. The man they had once admired had destroyed himself. That afternoon, Evelyn returned to the estate carrying shopping bags. A locksmith was changing the front gate locks. What are you doing? She demanded. The man handed her an envelope. I'm only following instructions. She tore it open. Inside was a formal notice. As the legal owner, Vanessa Monroe had withdrawn permission for unauthorized occupancy. Evelyn rushed inside. Movers were carefully packing her belongings. This is my home. Richard Collins calmly stepped forward. No, Mrs. Whitmore. He handed her the property deed. This has always been Ms. Monroe's home. Evelyn's shoulders slumped. She looked around the grand entrance she had proudly ruled for years. Every room, every staircase, every chandelier, none of it had ever belonged to her. Tears filled her eyes. I destroyed my own family. Richard answered quietly. Greed usually does. 6 months later, Sterling Capital was thriving again. Employee satisfaction had reached record highs. Investors returned. New projects created thousands of jobs. Vanessa had refused the CEO position. Instead, she appointed experienced leaders and focused on long-term growth as chairwoman. People admired her not because she was wealthy, but because she led with humility. One quiet evening, Vanessa walked through the gardens of the estate. The sunset painted the sky with warm shades of gold. As she approached the front gate, she noticed someone standing outside. Daniel. He carried one small suitcase. Gone were the expensive watches, the designer suits, the confidence. He looked older, tired. He offered a weak smile. I wasn't sure you'd come. Vanessa stopped a few feet away. What do you need, Daniel? He struggled to speak. I've had 6 months to think. She waited. I kept asking myself when I lost everything. Vanessa answered softly. You didn't lose everything in one day. He looked down. I know. I lost it one choice at a time. A tear rolled down his cheek. I thought success made me important. It doesn't. I thought money proved my worth. It never does. He finally looked at her. I don't deserve another chance. He swallowed hard. But if there's even the smallest possibility. Vanessa's expression remained kind. There was a time when I would have given you everything I owned. Daniel's eyes filled with hope. Then she continued. But trust isn't inherited. He lowered his head. It has to be protected. Silence settled between them. I forgave you a long time ago, Daniel. He looked up. But forgiveness doesn't always mean going back. She stepped toward the gate. The greatest lesson you ever taught me. He listened carefully. Was that the strongest person in the room isn't the loudest. She smiled peacefully. It's the one who never has to prove who they are. The gates slowly opened. Vanessa walked inside, without looking back. Moments later, the gates closed gently behind her. Daniel remained standing outside. Not angry, not bitter, simply facing the truth he had spent years refusing to see. Some victories arrive with applause. Others arrive in silence. And sometimes, silence speaks louder than betrayal ever could. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more emotional billionaire family betrayal stories, and share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Vanessa made the right decision by walking away forever, or would you have given Daniel a second chance? Let everyone know below. Your comment might inspire the next conversation. Until the next story, remember, wealth can be inherited, power can be borrowed, but integrity is earned, and no one can take it away.